Okay, good morning. We're right after Haggadah Shel Pesach, for that time of the year. So we're going to deal with right after the four sons. Yochel me Rosh Chodesh Talmud Lomar Bayom Mahu. I Bayom Mahu Yochel me Bod Yom Talmud Lomar. Bavur zeh lo amarti el b'shol sheyesh matzah umoror munachim lefanecha. One may think that the discussion, the mitzvah of Yitzias Mitzrayim, is right with Rosh Chodesh, the first of the month. The Torah therefore says, on that day, however, could mean while it is yet daytime. The Torah therefore says it is because of this. The expression because of this can only be used when matzah and moror are placed before you. Yochel me Rosh Chodesh, right? Right after the four sons, the Haggadah raises the question of when does the obligation of telling the story of Mitzrayim occur? When is Pesach? When is the Seder supposed to occur? And the first possibility that the Haggadah is suggesting is, well, we could do it maybe from, you have it? We can do it from Rosh Chodesh, no problem. Hold on 3 seconds. Find it. 3 seconds.
I'll read it for me, so I don't want to interrupt.
Is the same one?
Yeah.
Only Rosh Chodesh.
Thank you.
There you go. Right? Clearly, the Haggadah is suggesting, well, hey, maybe we could do Seder night on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, right? Yochel me Rosh Chodesh. Maybe Rosh Chodesh Nisan could we fulfill the mitzvah of recounting the story. Clearly, the association with Rosh Chodesh Nisan is because that is when the Torah teaches us a lesson. What lesson? How to tell time. Rosh Chodesh is from the capability of, okay, there's a new month. That means we're going to, in this case, 15 days later is Pesach, right? We are able to count time. We're able to teach time. This is the first time the Torah commands the Jewish people as a unit, a mitzvah. If anybody asks you, what is the first mitzvah that the Jewish community received as a Jewish community? It's this, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, telling time. As soon as we were able to dictate our own time, what do you become when you're able to dictate your own time?
Masters.
A free person. You become a free person. A slave has no ability in telling time. He's the subject of his master, correct? He can't tell time. His master tells him where to be, when to be, and what to do, correct? And but what freedom is demonstrated, I have a watch. I can tell where I'm going to be, when I'm going to be, and how I'm going to do it. Telling time is the essence of being free. So clearly the Haggadah is suggesting, you want to tell the story of Mitzrayim, of Exodus. From when could it start? From the moment that you began to sense freedom. And when that was that? When you were taught, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, Rosh Chodesh Nisan. If that is the case, the Haggadah is suggesting that perhaps when we were able to demonstrate freedom for the first time, that's when it's appropriate to have Seder night. But the Rav wonders, why did our sages question it here in association with Pesach? Nobody questioned, hey, let's do Lulav not on the 15th of the month of Tishrei, on the 1st of the month of Tishrei. Nobody ever asked you, Yochel, maybe we can do Lulav on the first day of Tishrei. Nobody ever asks that. The only problem, the only time we ever have this concept, this rabbinic question, is by, hey, when is Seder night? Maybe it could be on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, right? Ever suggested not on the 15th day of Tishrei, which is Sukkot. No, we won't do Lulav and Esrog. We're going to do Lulav and Esrog. When? On the 1st of Tishrei. The Rav suggests that the answer can be found in a Rambam. The Rambam wrote a work called Sefer HaMitzvah. He wrote many works. One of his works, what he wrote in his 20s, it's unbelievable to know that the Rambam did all of that without a computer and without electricity and without any illumination. He did it all in his head, literally. His head was his computer. And the Rambam wrote a work called Sefer HaMitzvos. Mitzvah 157, Kuf Nun Zayin, quotes, positive mitzvah, Kuf Nun Zayin, quotes the Mechilta de Rashbi that derives the mitzvah of recounting the story of Exodus from a pasuk in Shemos, chapter 13, verse 3, Perek Yud Gimel, Pasuk Gimel. What does it say? Vayomer Moshe la'am, Zachor es yom hazeh asher yitzasem miMitzrayim mibeis avodim. The Rambam says, you know what this pasuk teaches us? A very important mitzvah. Moshe said to the people, Zachor. What is Zachor? Remember. Remember this day on which you went out from Egypt. Clearly, the operative word is Zachor, remember. So you're to do what on Seder night? You're to remember, right? What is all of Pesach all about? It's remembering. We're going to recount the story. It's Zachor. If that is so, if Zachor, we know Zachor. We've seen it before. Where do we see it? In which mitzvah? That's correct. Zachor es yom hashabbos lekacho. We know what Zachor has a relationship with mitzvahs. It has with Shabbos. What does it mean? Zachor es yom hashabbos. Remember, right? We say shamar v'zachor. Correct? Zachor. What does that mean? That means you anticipate all week long. Shabbos is coming. The Ramban says, fascinating. We don't have in our Jewish literature a day. We don't have a Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday. What do we have? Yom Rishon l'Shabbos, Yom Sheni l'Shabbos, Yom l'Shabbos. Sunday is Yom Rishon, the first day towards Shabbos. Monday is the second day towards Shabbos. That's exactly how we say the Yom, right? Hayom Yom Sheni l'Shabbos. Today we said Hayom Yom Revi l'Shabbos. Today is the fourth day towards Shabbos. It's not called Wednesday. We don't have
Le, not May.
Le.
Because it
Two.
seems like it could be May too.
Two. We're going towards Shabbos. But what does Zachor mean? Zachor means you anticipate, you yearn. Not only you remember. Zachor is clearly, it's in the Torah, and it's the operative word. What does Zachor mean? The Ramban says, when it says Zachor es yom hashabbos lekacho, that you anticipate, you yearn, you look forward to Shabbos. If that is so, the impactful word of Zachor associated with Pesach would tell us what? Perhaps then Pesach should begin already when? On Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We should anticipate Pesach. We should be excited with Pesach. We should be yearning with Pesach. We should be counting towards the 15th, right? Maybe then we should already, when would be the first preparations for Pesach? Rosh Chodesh Nisan, right? That is what the sages are asking here, Rabbi Soloveitch explains. Of course, if the pasuk in the Torah is Zachor, to remember, correct? If it's the pasuk, Zachor es hayom azeh, asher asa, right? To remember, well, what does remember mean in Torah? Remember means to yearn, to anticipate. And the rabbis then say, well, if you're not only supposed to observe and recount, but you're supposed to anticipate and yearn, when would be the first time that you would yearn and anticipate? Rosh Chodesh. Yachol Rosh Chodesh. Now I understand the rabbinic question. When do I start anticipating, yearning for Pesach? With Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Got it? That's what they're asking. Rabbi Norman Lamb, Zichrono Livrocha, notes that there's another message this statement of the Haggadah is raising, and that would be not only when should you observe the mitzvah of telling the story of Mitzrayim, the message is embedded in understanding what Rosh Chodesh really teaches, Rabbi Lamb notes. Rosh Chodesh not only was when our freedom in Egypt began, it didn't only begin then, it didn't only take effect on the calendar on Rosh Chodesh, but Rosh Chodesh taught us this is a beautiful concept from Rabbi Lamb, the Jewish power and the value of mankind, of the value of man. Up until this moment, the value of man wasn't appreciated. The value of man, clearly, slavery destroys the value of man. Freedom celebrates the value of man. Rosh Chodesh was the correction from slavery. What did slavery do to man? You can't tell your own time, right? You're not in control of your own time. What did Judaism come along and say? Man is precious. Humanity is precious. The value of the human being is precious. Rosh Chodesh is teaching us, Yachome Rosh Chodesh, Rabbi Lamb says, is teaching us a lesson of the value of the human being. The ancients degraded the value of the human being. They enslaved the human being. You can only enslave somebody if you don't value the human being as important. Comes along, Yachome Rosh Chodesh. What's Rosh Chodesh teaching you? It's teaching you the value of the human being. Why? Because who decides when the Yom Tif is established? The human being, Besdin, right? Sanhedrin. You come, you tell them, hey, we saw the new moon. Who's in control? Who's in control? The man. The value, it's not astronomical. It's not calculated mathematically. It's the human being and his sight and his assessment of the situation, Rabbi Lamb says. That's what is being taught. Yachome Rosh Chodesh, you want to know the correction of the ancients, of the Egyptians and what they did? They devalued the human being. Yachome Rosh Chodesh, the lesson of Rosh Chodesh values the human being because Rosh Chodesh was an institution. Who was in control? Who was in control to setting the new month? Well, they came to the Besdin. Who's the Besdin? Human beings. Human beings calculated. Human beings, the value of the human being became what was important. Yachome Rosh Chodesh. The value of the human being himself was the correction. That's how Rabbi Lamb understands the lesson from Yachome Rosh Chodesh. But then the Haggadah says, no, we don't do from Rosh Chodesh. We don't celebrate. Rosh Chodesh is next week. We don't start something. And you think, thank God we don't have, right? Thank God Pesach is not next week, right? We have a few more weeks, right? Okay, so look at what the Haggadah says. No, you don't do it from Rosh Chodesh. Rather, Ella b'shah sheyesh matzah u'maror munachim lefanecha. The only time you can tell the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is when you have the props on the table. You have to have the matzah. You have to have the maror in front of you. And so Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says a beautiful insight. He says, this is the answer that is so important. Why don't we do it at Rosh Chodesh, right? Yachome Rosh Chodesh. No. You can't start with Rosh Chodesh. I get the lesson, right? Rabbi Soloveitchik said, Zachor, very nice. You should anticipate, you should yearn, but you can't celebrate. Pesach night is not on Rosh Chodesh. No, you have to have it when you have the props in front of you. And Rabbi Sachs, may he rest in peace, says, this is an assessment of Jewish education at its best. The Torah establishes a fundamental rule, he writes. This is what is being taught. The way to impart values to the next generation is not by speech, it's by action. We must communicate by what we do more than what we say. The only way you can impart the value of Seder is b'shah sheyesh matzah u'maror munachim lefanecha. You can't just tell the story. You have to have the involvement, right? The actions. What does matzah and maror represent? The actions. We must live and we must teach via actions, not just speech. Perhaps we can suggest that one can't really celebrate. This is taking Rabbi Sachs's point. Everybody got Rabbi Sachs's point. What you can't, it's not enough just to tell the story to the kids. If you don't live the story, you're not going to impart the story. And how do you demonstrate you live? Well, look, I act. Matzah is a reality in my life. The maror is a reality in my life, right? I am connected to the actions of Pesach. I just didn't walk in, hello, Pesach is here. I prepared for Pesach. Oh, you kids see you preparing for Pesach? That has the lasting impact upon them.
And for Jews, it's always about the food, Rabbi.
Yeah, but the food represents what? Our commitment to the values that we really believe in. Exactly. Okay. Also, I think that there's another lesson. When can you say the Seder? When can you observe the Seder? Maybe from Rosh Chodesh? No. You can't do it from Rosh Chodesh. What does the Haggadah say? Only when matzah and maror are in front of you. I would like to suggest that maybe you can only celebrate freedom when you remember what it was like when you didn't have it, right? The matzah and the maror are reminders to the Jew of what we missed, what we didn't have. When we didn't have it, who is going to really enjoy freedom? The one who has lost it and regained it. Those are the people. Speak to the survivors. Pesach was an unbelievable holiday for them. Why? Because it was a celebration of that which was absent in their life when they were victims against us, right?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did this, when we celebrated on the 15th or the night of the 14th, whatever it is, isn't that the exact date that we left?
100%.
Okay, so why wouldn't it?
So the rabbi says, so that the rabbis, your Haggadah is sharing with you the thinking of the literature that the rabbis said. Hey, when should we really celebrate this? That's a great question, right? Huh? When? The Torah tells you. That was Rabbi Soloveitchik's point. The Torah tells you. Hello? It's the 15th. You didn't ask that about Sukkot. You didn't ask that about Shavuos. The Torah tells you when to celebrate.
You know when to do a yortzeit. It's on the day,
exactly.
Right?
So what kind of a question is it? Maybe we should know, not the 15th. We should do it 15 days earlier. Huh?
Why?
Well, exactly. So Rabbi Soloveitchik said, what is the pasuk? The pasuk was Zachor es Yom. Zachor, remember. And he says, remember? I know that word. I've seen it before. When did I see it? By Shabbos. Zachor es, and what does it mean there? On Friday night, do you sit down and talk about creation? You have a family discussion about Bereshis bara Elokim? I don't.
If you talk
right?
about
What does Zachor mean?
Right?
What does Zachor mean? Rabbi Soloveitchik, quoting the Ramban, says, you know what Zachor means in Shabbos, in association with Shabbos? It means you anticipate, you yearn all week. All week you yearn for Yom Rishon l'Shabbos, Yom Sheni l'Shabbos, Yom Shlishi l'Shabbos, right? You yearn. We know people find beautiful items in the supermarket and they say, oh, you know what? I'm gonna put this aside. I'm gonna have it for Shabbos. That's Zachor es Yom HaShabbos. That was Wednesday. I went shopping today and I saw something beautiful. I said, you know what? I'm going to keep this for Shabbos. That's Zachor es Yom HaShabbos L'Kacho. So maybe the rabbis were teaching us Zachor es, the day that we left in Egypt. What does that mean? Anticipate. Yearn for it. When do you start yearning?
Right after
Chodesh. Right after Purim. Well, that's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's what the rabbis are suggesting. Exactly. Zachor, get ready. Yearn. Maybe that's what they were suggesting. Okay, got it? Okay. And Rabbi Lamb's point, right, that it's so important to appreciate the concept of freedom, of the value of man. Who's in charge of telling time? Man. Man is. It was taken away from us, and Judaism came along and reinstated the value and the power of mankind. That's what Judaism did. Judaism taught the world the value of the person, the value of each and every one of us. We're in control. We're partners with the Almighty in creation. That is a value that was taken away from us, certainly was taken away from us by the ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians, they made us valueless, right? We weren't in control. Come along, Yochomei Rosh Chodesh, the lesson of the values of man, or what Rabbi Sachs said, teaching the fundamental. Hello. Something is. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Don't know what happened. There's something got in there. Anyhow, the value of man, right? The value of man, and Rabbi Sachs is teaching us how to teach. He says, Yochomei Rosh Chodesh is teaching us another lesson. You can only teach, not by speech, only when you literally observe. I tell my kids, no, matzah is important to me. My actions are important to me. Right? Morah is important to me. I'm not teaching it to you. I'm demonstrating to you what my values are by actions. That's what Rabbi Sachs says is being taught. Okay. Then we go on and we say, Mitchila ovdei avodah zara hayu avoseinu. Right? In the beginning, our ancestors worshipped idols. But now the omnipresent one brought us close to him, right? Now v'achshov kervanu hamakom la'avodaso. But now HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us close to him in his service. Mitchila ovdei avodah zara. You have to understand that there was a major disagreement among Rav and Shmuel, two great rabbis in the Gemara. The Gemara in Pesachim, the Mishnah in Pesachim, Kuf Tes Zayin Amud Aleph 116a, establishes there's a formula how we tell the story on Pesach night. The Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Maschil bignus u'misayim b'shevach. You begin by telling the disparaging story, and in the end, you do what? You sing the praise. Well, what does that mean? You begin by telling the disparaging story of, you don't start with a beautiful story. What do you start with? How deprived we were. We're in the most despicable part of our history, right? So the rabbis tell us, well, there's a whole debate. Tell me, what does that mean? Rav and Shmuel argue. What is the degradation that we're talking? Maschil bignus. Start with degradation of the Jewish history. What's the most derogatory element of our history? That's what the discussion is. Shmuel says, I'll tell you what it was. Avadim hayinu lefaro b'mitzrayim. That we were slaves. You want to hear about degradation of us? We were made slaves. We were in Auschwitz. That's degradation. That's degradation. And that's Shmuel's opinion. Rav says, no. You want to know what the degradation is? Mitchila ovdei avodah zara. You want to know who our yichus was? You want to know where we came from? From Terach. We came from idol worshippers. That's who we were. So the argument is, how do you define what is the most derogatory element in Jewish history? Again, Shmuel says, Avadim hayinu. We were slaves. Rav says, no, this passage, Mitchila ovdei avodah zara. So what do we do in the Haggadah? We do both, right? We start with Avadim hayinu. We have both before we ever tell the story of our praise, correct? We were going to include both. But what is this argument? Rav Soloveitchik, what are they arguing over? One says Avadim hayinu, one says, no, our yichus. What's the argument? Whenever you have a machlokes in the Talmud, an argument by great rabbis, what do you have to do from an intellectual standpoint? What is the position? I want to understand, why does he say this? Why does he say that? What are they really arguing over? And Rav Soloveitchik says, you must understand, Shmuel chose Avadim hayinu because he says, if you want to understand degradation of the human being, it's a physical degradation. That's the ultimate degradation. What did you do to him physically? Well, you turned him into slaves. Shmuel says that is the worst part of it. Rav says, no, that's not the most derogatory element. There's a spiritual degradation. And what is that? That is captured on our yichus. Where do we come from? Spiritually. Who are our ancestors? Our ancestors were idol worshippers? Oh, that's what Rav says. Again, Shmuel says, if I tell you that you have to start with the story of the degradation of the human being, what's the most derogatory element? Somebody turned me into a slave. It's a physical degradation. And Rav says, I don't agree with you. I don't think that that's the ultimate degradation. I think your spiritual degradation is worse than your physical degradation. They're arguing on how do you describe, is it a physical degradation or is it a spiritual degradation? And of course, we include both. Rav Soloveitchik notes that this very argument of Rav and Shmuel, Rav again, remember the argument. Shmuel says degradation is physical. Rav says degradation is spiritual. They had another argument in the Talmud. In Gittin 38 and 39, the Talmud there discusses a fascinating halacha. If one relinquishes a non-Jewish slave and frees him, remember there was a time when we had slaves. We relinquish the person, we give him freedom. The Gemara discusses, do I just free him? Goodbye. Jayavek, go on your way. Or no, I must give him, the Gemara says, a document of his freedom. It's called a get shiur. A get shiur. He's divorced from me. He's no longer my slave. He has a card, a card to show everybody. I'm free. Got it? Do I have to give that or don't I have to give that? Can I just free him and that's all I need to do? Or must I write a document freeing him? Everybody got it? That's what the Gemara is discussing. Okay. Rav and Shmuel argue. There, one says, Shmuel says, no, you don't have to give anything more than freeing. Because Shmuel said what? What's the most derogatory? It's physical. Well, once you've given him his freedom, he doesn't need anything else. He has freedom. You let him go. What are you giving me in a document? Who cares about a document? But that's Shmuel. Got it? But Rav Soloveitchik says, Rav says, you have to give him a document. Why do you have to give him a document? Because his freedom isn't demonstrated just by allowing him to become quote unquote free. You have to demonstrate to the world, hey, I have a document. I have the pass. I have a, if you will, like a spiritual component to me that is valuable to me. I can demonstrate it to the world. And Rabbi Soloveitchik says that's exactly what their argument is. The same argument over do you have to give a get shiur or don't you is the argument here. How do you define degradation of the human being, the ultimate degradation of the human being? One says, I'll tell you, turning a person into a slave, that couldn't be worse. The other says, that's not true. There is something worse, which is a spiritual degradation. And that's Rav. And that's why we include both in the Haggadah. Because the truth is, they're both derogatory. They're both degradation of the human being. Rabbi Lamb.
But were our fathers really Obey Avodah Zarah?
Where?
Still there.
Oh, but that's where we came from.
Abraham.
That's your yichus. Tell me, you're going for a shidduch, right? And tell me who you're, right? Exactly. Tell me, who's the grandfather? Oh, the grandfather was an Avodah Zarahnik. You know, he was worshiping Buddhas. Oh, you want my daughter or my son to, right? That's derogatory. That's the worst degradation
Rabbi,
possible.
do you think that our enemies, Hamas, after they degraded all of the hostages,
right,
and they made them go through a ceremony, and they also gave them a ta'ut?
No, they didn't get it. They were doing it. They were doing
They
it.
had a graduation
Of
ceremony.
course. Right.
They gave them a paper.
They were using the spiritual element, if you will, to even worse. Which was worse?
No, but
which is
that,
right? Which is the real degradation? That's the question. Which is the real? And we were very
degradation was making them go through a ceremony,
and we were very upset about that.
I know, but I wonder if they
were very upset. Oh no, I don't know. I don't know. They came up with it on their own. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
Too much on the word itself.
Right.
But degradation, yeah, us being slaves, that's a degradation for
right.
sure. But coming from Avodah Zarah, degradation implies coming down from something. So if you started in that place, is that really a degradation?
Very good. Very good. Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, it might be folks.
But you'll see in a few moments. I'm going to talk. But you'll see in a few moments. What does that really mean? Give me a half a second. Okay.
But also the spiritual stuff, that's for this world and the next world. So that seems like it's worse to me than just the physical in this world.
100%. But now you understand the machlokas, right? You understand the argument. The rabbi, one saying this, one saying what was motivating their thinking. Well, now you understand what was motivating their thinking. Rabbi Lamb, may he rest in peace, says this debate of Rav and Shmuel gives us a platform to discuss debate. What is arguments? We know anytime you go to a discussion in halacha, what's inevitable? Oh, it's a machlokas, right? You hear that constantly. Oh, it's an argument. And there are those that say, well, if it's an argument on everything so basic, right, like this, about the story of our people, and we're even arguing over that, So there are critics that say, you see, Judaism doesn't have any authentic history. They don't even know. They're arguing. This one says that one says that one. What does that tell you? They don't have any real authentic tradition. Rabbi Lamb notes that's the critics. The critics say that about us. And Rabbi Lamb says they don't understand Judaism one iota. This is a beautiful insight. One iota. And this is where he deals with it. He says this is a platform to discuss debate. He says, what's debate? Debate in Judaism is, number one, you value the mind of everybody around the table. Everybody has independent thinking. Independent thinking is crucial in Judaism. It's crucial in the classroom. We have to develop that independent thinking, right? In Lumdis, in a real yeshiva and brilliant minds, what are we looking for? Chidush. What's chidush mean? A new, insightful idea, correct? And that very, by the way, that very theory and that very value of chidush is now playing out in the startup nation. Why are we so successful as a Jewish people? Because we're always looking for the chidush. We're always looking for a new idea, a new way to look at it. He says, it doesn't mean that we don't have an authentic tradition. What it means is we have placed a primary value on people thinking. And when they think, that demonstrates they value. Yeah, I want them to think about my tradition. That's exactly, I want them to think about the Haggadah. I want them to think about the Chumash, the Rashi, right? The Gemara, the Mishnah. That's exactly right. That is what they're demonstrating. And the critics don't get that. We value independent thought. We value new ideas. And we value, how do you understand this? That's important to us. Not our traditions. Our traditions don't change one iota. But understanding our traditions do change.
Well,
right?
also with them, it's not up for debate. It's
Right.
this way
That's correct.
because they can't defend it.
But that value has come, now you understand, that value is so powerful that you can explain, hey, how did we become the startup
We have
nation?
nothing to hide from. It's
Right?
not
We have
fabricated.
nothing to hide from. And Rabbi Lamb says this is a beautiful platform to discuss what is the value of debate, because we're debating this. Well, we don't know what the genus is. It's the formula again is maschil b'genus u'mesayim b'shevach. Start with the genus, the negative, and end with the praise. Correct? The Rav noted that this passage in the Haggadah offers us another lesson as well. It reflects, and this is going to answer your question, the modesty of the Jewish people. Modesty of the Jewish people. What does that mean? In the ancient world, the nations were always we're the children of God. Look who we are. Every one of the ancient nations were accustomed to promote themselves as God's chosen and they would tell you why they deserve to be considered God's chosen. And what did the Jewish people do? No, not so big news. You really want to know about our story? It really isn't so pretty. We're opening our closets, right? And we're showing you what's in our side of our closet. We were slaves. Well, how did you become a slave, right? Let's think for 2 seconds. When Shmuel says slavery is the worst, is the genus, that means other people oppressed you. How did you get oppressed? That means you weren't valuable. That means, who are you? How did you let that happen? If you think about it, what does oppressed mean? You have to thank you. Right? Many people, even Jewish people said, Israelis in particular who didn't understand the Holocaust, right? What did they say? They went to slaughter like lambs, right? And it was the most insulting factor because they didn't realize that how were they supposed to do an uprising? Again, did they have weapons? Did they have anything? They couldn't even do an uprising. And yet there were uprisings. There were spiritual uprisings too. There were physical uprisings too. So we have a story to tell. Shmuel says, that's not so nice. Oh, you were slaves? Who wants to be married to a slave? Right? Your parents were slaves? That's number one. Number two, what does Rav say? No, that's, you want to know our yichus? I'll tell you about our yichus. We were worshiping idols. That's where we came from. That is, we never paraded and promoted. We deserve to be God's chosen, correct? They were princes. They were kings. We weren't. We never said that we were princes and kings. The Jewish people were extremely honest, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, about who we were. That didn't exist in the ancients. The ancients weren't, they said, we're God's chosen because we're princes and kings. And Jews came along and said, you want to know who we are? Well, we were slaves, and we were, our ancestors were idol worshipers. We really, in other words, what are we saying? What are we saying? We really didn't deserve to be God's chosen. That's modest. That's humility. That's what we're saying. God was the one who was kind and chose us because we were modest. That's correct. We descended from idol worshipers when we weren't from it. We were grateful to God, for without his kindness, we wouldn't be who we are today. That's the lesson that's being taught. Maschel b'gnus, when you say maschel b'gnus, what does that mean? Let's start off with the derogatory story about our past. Why? Why do you have to start? So Soloveitchik explains. That's teaching you modesty, humility, who we were, and honesty. Don't hide from who you are. And it also demonstrates what you became, right? You picked, what's the expression? You picked yourself up from your bootstraps, right? Okay, that's the great point. But Jonathan Sacks, in typical fashion, may rest in peace, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, famously wrote, and he had a pen that nobody else had. It's just his use of words are unbelievable. Listen to his words. He says, you want to maskal b'gnusum sayim b'shevach is all about? If you want to understand the people he writes, listen to the way it tells its story. Beautiful. If you want to understand the people, listen carefully to the way they'll tell their story. In light of this, he concludes, listen to the way the Jew tells his story. And there's a formula. How do we tell our story? Maschal b'gnus v'sayim b'shevach. He says, the formula that Chazal were telling us on Seder night contains a crucial truth about the Jewish way we tell our story. Rabbi Sacks notes, our story is not a fairy tale, and our story is not a Greek tragedy. The legacy of Exodus, and I quote Rabbi Sacks, is certainly not in the world where they all lived happily thereafter. No, that's not Judaism. There is no closure. There is no sense of ending. Isn't that what we're experiencing right now with Iran? There's no closure. There's no ending. We still have this war, and it's going on and on and on. I quickly saw this morning, I didn't read it, but I quickly saw on the op-ed page in the Wall Street Journal an article from the French thinker in France. What?
Descartes.
No. He wrote. He's writing. Anti-Semites will come up with any story possible about us, as if we control Trump. That's basically what he's writing, as if we control Trump. But right, there's no closure. There's no sense of ending. We're living with this constantly, and there it is every day. Right, the legacy of Exodus is there's no closure. It's not. They lived all happily thereafter. It's not a fairy tale. The Jewish story, he notes, is not a Greek tragedy. We don't tell our stories like a Greek tragedy because a Greek tragedy has no hope. Tragedies have no hope. The gods do what in Greek tragedies? They play with us. They dangle us to their benefit, correct? You can never avoid the tragedy in a Greek tragedy. You're not in control at all. Not so for the Jews. We must start with our disgrace and end with our praise because it frames us for how we are to live our lives. We are to lift ourselves from our bootstraps. That's correct. We don't hide from the sadness that marks our history, and yet we never lose hope. With all of this, we never lose hope. Even now, when it's so depressing what's going on, that they hate us so much, we never lose hope. We never lose hope. Rabbi Sachs quotes Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was the Jew who survived Auschwitz, right? And created a school of psychiatry called logotherapy. Survival, Frankl, he argued, says, it's a matter of man's search for meaning. If we can find meaning in our suffering, Frankl wrote, we can emerge, if not physically, certainly psychologically intact. There was, he discovered, one freedom left in Auschwitz, that every other vestige of liberty and humanity had been destroyed. There was one element of freedom that the Nazis could not take from us. And now I'm quoting Viktor Frankl. We who lived in the concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting the others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been very few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. There were people who never allowed the Nazis to take that away from them. And that, he says, is the lesson. Did every human being do it? No, but there were those who were willing to give their last piece of bread away. The story is told after Mauthausen was freed, Rabbi Eliezer Silver, may he rest in peace, who was here in Cincinnati, was sent by, I'm sorry? No, Vadat Hatzalah. Yes, Vadat Hatzalah was the organization here in America in particular that tried to save Talmidei Chachamim and rabbis, etc., from the destruction. But anyhow, Rabbi Eliezer Silver was sent as a chaplain as a Jewish chaplain in the army, and he comes to Mauthausen after Mauthausen's freed, in uniform, in American uniform, by the way. And Eliezer Silver was a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He came to America, I think, in the 1910s, 1920s, very early, or maybe even earlier than that. He was known as a brilliant man. He was a rabbi in Cincinnati, it just so happens. But anyhow, Eliezer Silver goes to Mauthausen, and he's trying to gather a minyan. Wiesenthal tells this story when he's in his 90s. He recounts the story to a conference of European rabbis. They're meeting as a conference. The European rabbis meet every year, and it's all Orthodox rabbis, and he was being honored. This was towards the end of his life, and he spoke at the conference, and he tells this to the rabbis. He says, so Rabbi Silver is there, and he's trying in Mauthausen, right after we was liberated, to get a minyan together, and he stops Wiesenthal. He doesn't know who Wiesenthal is, and Wiesenthal knows no Rabbi Silver. He says, come, join me for a minyan. We need you. You're the center, the last one, the number 10. Without you, we can't have a minyan. So Wiesenthal says, never. He tells this to the rabbis. He says, never. I'm not going to a minyan. And that immediately caused Rabbi Silver to raise the question, explain, why not? So you want to know why not? I saw with my own eyes in the concentration camps a man who smuggled in tefillin, and he gave the tefillin to people by taking their bread away from them. You give me the bread, I'll give you the tefillin. You can put on the tefillin. He said, do you realize they gave up their bread? He took their bread away from them, their last lifeline to living, so that they should put on the tefillin. So Rabbi Silver says, that's bothering you, right? That's that visual. He says, that doesn't bother me. Just the opposite. What you told me is, don't look at the man who took the bread for the tefillin. Look at how many people were willing to give up their last piece of bread to put on tefillin. That's what I see. Matters what you see. You see him taking away the bread. I see all of those people willing to give up their bread for the tefillin. And that's, you can't take away from them. And when I was reading Viktor Frankl, that's exactly the story. That you can't take away from people. No matter how it's up to the person, right? If he's giving his piece of bread away, or the Nazis couldn't stop that. They can't take that away from a human being. That's the way we tell our story. Maschil bignus u'mesayim basheva. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a Greek tragedy. Ours is reality. That's the way we started, and we never lost hope. That's why we have this formula. If you want to explain at your Seder, this is a beautiful thought. The formula of the rabbis is, how do we tell our story? And the way you tell your story tells you more about the people than anything else. We tell our story with total honesty, with total humility, and we tell our story with, not as a fairy tale. It doesn't end with everybody living happily thereafter. We're still fighting this war, correct? And we tell our story that we never lose our hope. We never lose hope. We maschal b'gnus, but what's the end? U'mesayim b'shevach. It's going to end up with nishmas kol chai. How do you end the Haggadah? With nishmas kol chai. What is that? Singing, praise to the Almighty. That's the beauty of the Haggadah. Okay? So that's the formula that the rabbis are using. And now we understand, well, why are there two approaches, right? There's Rav and there's Shmuel. Shmuel says, you want to know the history, what is the most derogatory comment? It's the physical oppression, because that immediately tells you that we, to a certain degree, we certainly weren't respected, right? And we were able to be turned into animals like this, right? That's pretty derogatory. And no, Rav says that's not the story. The real story is our spiritual degradation, where we really came. But again, we were honest about it, we were humble about it, and we never lost hope. Got it? That's okay. But then continue. What does the text tell us? Okay, and now, but now, but now the omnipresent one has brought us close to his service. Rav Soloveitchik commented that when Rav in the Talmud suggested that we start answering our children's questions about Exodus with mitchila ovdei avodah zara, this was the question that the Gemara says, how do you answer your child who asks you the question, right? How do you answer the child that asks you all the questions? And Rabbi Soloveitchik says, when Rav in the Talmud says, you do it from this, here's the answer. He says, what do you mean this is the answer to our child's questions? Our trials, right? The child asks manishtana, and then we give him an answer. What is the answer? Well, there was the debate. Is it Avodim Ayinu, or is it the Mitchila Ovdei Avodah Zara? So Rabbi Soloveitchik answers. He says, what is Rav saying? Who says, no, it's Mitchila Ovdei. Don't give him the answer of Avodim Ayinu. Give him Mitchila Ovdei Avodah Zara. What kind of answer is that? So Rabbi Soloveitchik says, it's the words, V'achshav Keravanu hamakom la'avodaso. Now God has brought us close to his servants. You know what we're teaching the child? You want to know why we celebrate this holiday? What's the goal of the Seder? You have to ask yourself, what's the goal? What is the goal of the Seder? What is the goal of the Seder? And Rav says these words, V'keravanu hamakom la'avodaso. We fulfill the commandment of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim with these words that capture the goal of telling the story. The goal is to recognize the election of the Jewish people as God's chosen people. You're imparting to your children around the table and to the people around your Seder. The goal of Seder night is to indicate to them that they recognize that we are the chosen people that have a mission. The mission is to impart God's words to the world. That's exactly what the Jew does. We should note that God is called Hamakom right here. Look, V'keravanu Hamakom la'avodoso. And what's Makom mean? The one that's everywhere. Why do we refer to God that way? Because when you say God is omnipresent, everybody is included, isn't it? Everybody is included. Nobody's left out of space. Everybody's included. There isn't a Jew that's not included. When we have, who do we invite to the Seder? 4 children, right? We invite the Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, the Sheni Yodei Elisho. And how do we say it over there? What's the words that we use introducing Baruch Hamakom Baruch Hu, right? Isn't that the way you introduced the 4 sons? Baruch Hamakom Baruch Hu. And so now we use the same word, V'kervanu Hamakom, the one who's omnipresent. Bless the one who is omnipresent. That is the goal of Seder night. Rav is telling you, you're to teach your children V'kervanu Hamakom la'avodaso. You were chosen for a purpose. You know, that's the lesson of Seder night, to teach our kids, to teach those around the table that we believe we have a mission. We're on a mission to Kervanu Lamakom La'avodaso, that we have a relationship with the Borei Olam, and that's what we're going to impart to the world. We impart to the world. They say that Hitler, this is documented, Hitler hated the Jews more for being, they thought, they quote unquote, Hitler, that the Jew thought he was the conscience of the world. That is our job. Yes, we are the conscience of the world. 100%, we're the conscience of the world. That's why the anti-Semites hate us. Haman hated us for that very reason. We're the conscience of the world. And the anti-Semites hate us to this very reason, to this very day, because we're the conscience of the world. We always have been and we always will be. Where is that noted in the Haggadah? These words, V'kervanu hamakom la'avodaso. Those are the words that Rav is saying. That is the goal. If you teach that, you have taught the goal of Judaism, of the Seder, to those who are around the table. To continue on, then at the very end it says, the attain on this passage, right? The attain le'esav es har seir la'reshes also, right? Esav, by the way, Judaism, Yaakov got what? Eretz Yisrael. Esav didn't get Eretz Yisrael. Esav got Seir, a different part of the Middle East. But he didn't get Eretz Yisrael. Why are we telling us that here? That's what we're telling. You're quoting. You're saying, hey, guys, they were brothers and they were twins. One got one way and one got the other way. When you have twins, what do you suspect? They're identical. Twins are going to be identical. And the text here is telling you just the opposite. Know that twins, they were born from the same mother, but the story ends there. Right? The story ends there. Esav and Yaakov are nothing alike. The passage offers us the basic difference between Yaakov and Esav. They were born twins, but one, Esav, moved out of Yeretz Canaan, 1, 2, 3. He left. And he got Har Seir, 1, 2, 3. Yaakov, however, did not have such a destiny. He and his descendants never gave up their love of Israel. That's what this passage is telling you. You want to understand the difference between Yaakov and Esav? Esav goes off to his land. He gets it 1, 2, 3. He settles in. That's Esav. Yaakov, he's suffering to get to Eretz Yisrael, right? Think about Yaakov's biography. Yaakov has to run for his life from Esav. He runs to his uncle Lavan. He's mistreated there and abused there. After 21 years, he finally comes back. On his way back, what happens? It takes him a long time to get back. He encounters Esav, right? But on his way back, he loses his wife Rachel that he loves. He can't even bury her in Maras Machpelah. It is one tragedy after another tragedy. Tell me, does Yaakov lose hope? Never. Yaakov doesn't lose hope. That's the Jewish story. Does Yaakov lose his love for the land of Israel? Not at all. You want to know the most Zionistic part of the Haggadah? Rabbi Soloveitchik says it's right here. It's Esav got his land 1, 2, 3. Yaakov did not get his land 1, 2, 3. The truth is, you finish Chumash Bereshis. We were promised what? Avram was promised what? Lech lecha mi'atzecha miladecha el ha'aretz asher arecha. I'm going to take you to this land. And it's going to be yours for your children, your grandchildren, for eternity. Tell me, you finished Chumash Bereshis. Does Avram's descendants, do they inherit at that moment Eretz Yisrael? End of Chumash Bereshis, we still don't have Eretz Yisrael, right? When do we get Eretz Yisrael? after 400 years plus in slavery in Egypt, and then another 40 years wandering in the desert. Finally, we come to Eretz Yisrael, and then we get kicked out.
Right.
And then 2,000 years later, right after the Churban Bayis Sheni, we came back in 1948. It's unbelievable what we're living through today. It's unbelievable. We are living through the biblical promise, but we didn't get it. We didn't. Yaakov, this passage, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, why is it in the Haggadah? You have to look at every passage in the Haggadah and say, why is this here? What is the message that the rabbis included into this text? What they're telling you is a love of Zion right here. It's the love of the Jewish people for Eretz Yisrael. Esau gets his land, 1, 2, 3. He gets it easy.
Where is
Yaakov-
Seir, by the way?
What?
Where is Seir?
Seir is Jordan and Iraq, that whole area, right? That's where it is. If they get that, they get the oil also, right? Okay, but we don't. We have to get back to Eretz Yisrael, and yet that love of the land is never lost on us, and that's what's promised. We're going to come back. That's why it's here. We're going to come back, and we're never going to lose the love of it. Then take a look at the very end of this story. What happens? Then he says, afterwards, and how are you leaving? Right? All of this. And then they're going to leave with great wealth. We were promised that we're going to leave with great wealth from Egypt, right? What does that mean? And why was that included here? Rabbi Lamb suggests that we read this not that we left Egypt with much wealth, but rather we should read this to mean, and afterwards they will go out with a wealth of greatness. Yetzei b'rechush gadol. You know what we were promised? Not jewelry, not china and crystal and silver. No, that's not what we were promised. Afterwards, we will go out with a wealth of greatness. Our greatness was manifested in the fact that we left Egypt and we rose to the stature of an interest in taking, not an interest in taking revenge. That wasn't our interest at all. Our interest was in creating a people. After we were, think about it for 2 seconds, the night of Exodus, where were we? What were we doing?
Pesach Seder. Right?
Oh,
We're eating
what were we not doing? What were we not doing?
Being slaves.
No. What were we not doing? Taking revenge against our enemies. As Rabbi
We
Soloveitchik
never take
says,
the spoil.
throughout history, insurrections of slaves against their masters have been ruthless. Throughout history, they've been ruthless, right? The cruelty demonstrated by the rebels is blood-chilling when you read it. Guess what? The Iranian government is very worried about that. They're very, very worried. They've oppressed their people for 40 plus years, and they're afraid that an uprising will be a blood-chilling experience. That's exactly what they're afraid of, right? That is what's going. But on the night of Exodus, what happened? On the night of Exodus, what happened? That's why Rabbi Lamb reads it. Yetzei b'rechush gadol. What, you went and you got a lot of money? That's not how you should. We'll go out with a wealth of greatness. What was our greatness when we left Egypt? We did not take revenge. We did not go out and kill our enemies. You know what we did? We sat around the table. We didn't even leave our houses. We sat around the table and we sang Hallel. We sang praise to the Almighty. After the concentration camps liberated, you would have expected that the Jews go piling through the cities of Germany and Poland, right, and Europe, and finding every Nazi around and killing them in cold blood on the streets. That didn't happen. Just the opposite, by the way, right? Just the opposite happened in 1946, right? The terrible uprising where Polish killed. They thought the Jews were coming back to take their homes, and they killed us. You know, the bottom line is we didn't take revenge. That wasn't the purpose. That wasn't our role. Our role was Yetzei B'Rechush Gadol. We left with a wealth of greatness. We left not one person was hurt on the night of Seder. Not one person was taken. We didn't kill anybody. We should have taken these people that threw our babies in the Nile and drowned them. We should have done the same to them. No, that's not Jewish way. That's not the Jewish way. We had a unique revolution. Our revolution was sitting around the Seder and telling our story of Hallel, right? Truth is the same thing was at the concentration camps. Revenge was not part of our language. It has never been a part of our language. Yetzei B'Rechush Gadol, again I repeat, a wealth of greatness. That was what we left Egypt with. I'm sorry?
It's a Torah prohibition not to take revenge too.
Well, yeah, but
that's not. We hadn't gotten. Well,
yeah, number one, I mean, not to take revenge on that's not against your enemy. Your enemy, but it's not Jewish. It is not Jewish to take that. That wasn't our goal. Our goal was to get out and to sing praise to the Almighty. So this whole text that we often read very quickly at the Seder, right? There are highlights of the Seder, and this is not one of them. But if you start focusing on the text, you realize that there is a powerful message, right? There's a very, very powerful message with analyzing carefully what this text is telling us. A lot of material that could be good material for discussions at your table.
Thank you.
Certainly, the Maschil B'Gnus Messiah B'Shevach, the formula. The rabbis tell us how are we supposed to tell the story? There was a formula, and what does that formula mean? Why was that the formula? We are not a fairy tale, and we're not a Greek tragedy, right? We're a tale of humility. That's how we tell our stories, and we're a tale of hope. It still plays a very important role, as we see on right in front of our eyes. Okay, next week, Bezrat Hashem, I'll let you know what's happening next week. But yeah, we'll announce. Okay, you got it.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I guess that's where the Spartan acted out. I think so much about the preparation, how the Spartan come in,